Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, March the 1st, 2023, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, we are a news podcast, so sometimes we do try to watch our language, but words do fly. At the same time, guys, there are things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we start this? Well, there's only one way to start this. On this first day of March, going into 2023. Well, as I've said many times on this podcast, the way the U.S. handles student loan debt has been challenging, frustrating, and overall confusing. But as Joe Biden did to unveil his plan for the student loan debt relief to happen, of course, two very ornery people and a group of conservatives decided that they wanted to sue. And now that case is currently being listened to in the Supreme Court, where keep in mind, the Supreme Court is heavily conservative leaning. I'm concerned.
Tonight, the Biden administration's plan to wipe away nearly $500 billion in student loan debt, facing a skeptical conservative majority on the Supreme Court.
And along comes the government and tells that person, you don't have to pay your loan.
The financial futures of more than 40 million now in limbo. People like Maggie Bell, the first in her family to graduate from college, carrying $30,000 in federal loans.
That is difficult. It's depressing. It's stressful.
She wants the justices to uphold President Biden's plan to erase $10,000 in federal student loan debt for anyone who makes less than $125,000 and $20,000 for lower income borrowers.
Groceries are high. Gas is high. Like, seeing a vacation this year is very difficult for me, right? And I'm not the only person in this boat.
Liberal justices today saying the proposal will help millions left struggling after the pandemic.
They don't have friends or families or others who can help them make these payments. The evidence is clear that many of them will have to default.
But the White House plan is now on pause after 6 Republican-led states and borrowers sued. Several conservative justices today questioning whether the administration overstepped its authority by going around Congress.
Most casual observers would say if you're going to give up that much amount of money, they would think that's something for Congress to act on.
Tashfika Robb is a college sophomore and son of a taxi driver. He didn't take out federal loans and says it's unfair to force him to pay off others' debts.
I chose not to take this loan, even though I could definitely benefit from it. And I needed that money, but I chose not to. So how is it fair to people like myself? I'm not able to get a single penny out of this program.
Laura joining me live now. Laura, despite their obvious skepticism about the president's plan, the justices could still dismiss the suit.
That's right, Lester. Several of the justices seemed largely unconvinced that the plaintiffs in this case were actually harmed and have the legal right to sue. Meantime, all federal student loan payments will remain on hold for at least 60 days until after the high court rules.
Okay, so let's dissect something here, because this is usually the general argument when it comes to paying off student loans. I didn't take out any loans. I managed to put myself through college, working multiple jobs. I was able to graduate with no debt. I was able to do this. So why, as a taxpayer, do I have to pay for someone else who couldn't do what I did? By far the dumbest argument ever. And there's a lot out there on the top 20 list. It's the dumbest argument ever. Okay, because I see this all the time. Everybody's situation was different. If everybody's situation was the same, we'd all have the same outcomes. We all came from different incomes, different households, different locations, different areas around the US and around the world. So what the situation was for you when you went to college may have been completely different for someone else. That being said, because we were all told, I'm not going to say the lie, but the sell. The sell was that you went to college to get a degree, to get a good job, because having just a high school diploma wasn't going to cut it. And they weren't pushing vocational, they weren't pushing skill trades. They weren't pushing welders. They weren't pushing plumbers, mechanics, contractors, HVAC technicians, electricians. They weren't pushing any of these skill trades, which, by the way, have really told the test of time, because those areas, not knocking them, are still in high demand, still offer paid training, still can go. And that's why I tell people it's never too late to learn a skill. It never is too late. So, but we were never told that. The big thing was go to college, get a degree, earn the big bucks. You get the high paying jobs. So the reason why, of course, with the job market and it fluctuating, especially for me, if you work in IT, the IT world right now is really flipped upside down. It's really flipped upside down on its head. When you have companies that are reducing workforces, companies that are being stringent upon entry-level and mid-level job applications, you could have all the credentials in the world and still get passed over because either companies are not hiring or companies are not paying enough. But I digress. Going back to student loans. Yes, a lot of people took out those loans, not just in the IT world, but in the medical field as well. You think doctors are rich? Doctors and nurses and physicians have the highest amount of student loans because, let's be honest, being a doctor or a surgeon isn't paying the way it used to. Being a nurse, even though in this day and age where nurses are needed in hospitals, unless you're a traveling nurse or a nurse that has a business degree or is in administration, you're not getting paid as much as you should be getting paid. So with that being said, student loans are a problem, and student loans prevent people from really living life, from buying a car, from owning a home. It impacts your credit, your debt to income ratio. It impacts it all. But we have been saying for the longest time, student loan debt needs relief. At first, people were saying wipe it out, and I had nothing against wiping it out. I really don't, because you know why I have nothing against wiping it out? Because we had two wars, when Iraq, when Afghanistan. The combination of those two wars, what it cost the U.S., you could have put towards student loan debt and then some. So saying we don't have the money is bullshit, because we did. We paid for it in wars. Also, again, going back to those who didn't take student loans. Yes, you may have had a nice job. You may have had a surplus. Mommy and daddy or somebody else may be able to help you out. You may have had some loans or assets that, were great in value that you could sell off and therefore not take loans. Good for you. But as much as you sit there and say that you complain about paying for someone else's loans, I didn't hear spit when it comes to the PPP loans. That failed program that was supposed to help small businesses keep their payrolls, keep people employed and working, where they've had rampant PPP loan fraud, and even more so, PPP loans that were forgiven by companies and individuals who had the means to pay it back. Not only had the means to pay it back, but had the means to get loans themselves. You had multi-million-dollar companies, corporations, religious megachurches taking out these loans have been forgiven. But you understand, by them taking out PPP loans that were forgiven, that means you, the American taxpayer, will have to pay that back. But nobody complains. Nobody complains, because all they hear is a bunch of people, well, you never should have took that loan if you couldn't afford to pay it back. That's predatory lending. You want to know how it's predatory lending? And again, I don't mean to go off on this tangent, but do you want to know how that's predatory lending? Predatory lending works like this. If you're 18 years old, you cannot go into a bank and say, hey, I would like to get a loan for let's just say $50,000 to $60,000 to start a business. A bank will laugh at you on the way out. You're 18 years old. Yes, you may have a business plan. You may have had the first 5 to 10 years of projections. You may have had your losses and gains in fiscal quarters. You may have had that all broken down to a T, ready to present to this bank to take a risk on you, to give you $50,000 to $60,000 for you to start your own business. And the bank laughs you out of the room, much less the building, the parking lot. That very same bank will turn around and give an 18-year-old a $60,000 loan with a ridiculous APR for a student loan, and now they realize they practically have a person that's on the hook for life. Because yes, there are some people that can pay off student loans, but there are some people who have families, who have jobs, especially with the fact that everything's gone up by your paycheck. And the interest alone on these student loans is ridiculous. There are people out there right now that have been paying for 10 straight years on student loans, and their principal hasn't changed. They've just been paying on interest this entire time. That's predatory lending. That's something that shouldn't even be allowed to happen. But you have folks who are worried about paying for other people when they don't understand you're already doing that with wars. You're already doing that with foreign aid, especially to Ukraine. You're already doing that with the PPP loans that have been forgiven, that could have been paid back by those who had the means to do so. But you want to argue about one individual who's trying to struggle to make ends meet, and that removing that $10,000 or $20,000, albeit for some people it's a drop of bucket, it's a drop of water in a bucket. It really is, but it can help. Now, do I agree that Biden should have went farther? Absolutely. I think he should have went farther. I think he should have pushed it, honestly. But Biden is a moderate Democrat. That's basically conservative. That's basically conservative with a Democrat label. I don't expect him to push forward with it. A lot of Democrats out there are not in line with the rest of the progressive Democrats because they still believe that shouldn't happen. They believe that, there still needs to be some personal accountability, but yet, again, didn't bat an eye when PPP loans were being forgiven. So, with that being said, this is why I said the argument that a lot of people make, well, I could have took that loan, but I didn't, is bullshit. You're complaining about one thing, but you don't complain about the other. That just goes to show you that some people are surely misguided and short-sighted. And yes, I said it. Argue with your mama. But of course, like they said in the story, that the Supreme Court could just dismiss the case, and if so, it could, those same people could sue, and it can go to lower appeals court and really tie things up for a couple of years to come. But if we can forgive PPP loans, we can forgive student loans. That's all I'm saying. Not to mention the simple fact of the matter, by forgiving student loans, you have really increased the economy, because now folks don't have to worry about paying back their debts. They can actually go buy homes. They can actually go buy cars. They can actually get jobs. Because yes, jobs look at your credit too. If you got crappy credit and you're trying to go into a certain financial sector or a place that deals with money or statistics, things of that nature, you bet your ass they're going to look at your credit, because your credit shows that you are either a liability or a problem, but mostly liability. But again, we got to wait and see. Moving right along, though, there are a couple stories I did want to talk about, especially with this one, because after this story, it kind of leads into what else I want to go into about the fact that, you know what, I used to worry about kids being homeschooled. When I see stories like this, I'm kind of for it.
As 10-year-old Zai watches cartoons, his mother feels guilt.
As a parent, you're supposed to do everything to protect your child. And the fact that I was not there to protect him, that breaks my heart.
She's angry, too, about what her son claims his fourth grade teacher at Crosby Elementary did last Wednesday after lunch.
Went to another teacher's room to get some tape. She come back into the classroom, and that's when she began to tape him. He got his hand, and he went like this here, went around, came back around. I say, when she started to tape you, what did you say? He said, I asked her, what did I do? I wasn't doing anything. I was just walking.
Zai told mom when she left, several students started hitting him from behind, laughing. One kid even saying
that he was going to slap him as hard as Will Smith slapped Chris Rock.
The child, who suffers from migraines, asked to go to the nurse's office.
Before she let him go to the nurse, She told him, you know, I was just playing with you.
Mom says she wasn't called until after school, after a doctor and police talked to Zai. And since then, she says getting reports and hallway video has been made difficult. In a statement, Forney ISD says they're aware of the allegations and an investigation is underway, adding there are two sides to every story. We asked the district to clarify what they mean when they say there are two sides to every story when the end result is a child allegedly taped to a chair. A spokeswoman tells me what they mean is at this point, they still don't know if it happened at all.
So why is it two sides to every story? The assistant principal and the principal both told me that she admitted to doing it.
As to any rumors Zai had behavioral issues or was hitting his teacher, Mom says no way. She's never gotten a single call.
Whoever is out there saying, you know, that that's why she did it, you don't do that to a child. He's not an animal. He's a human being.
The school district's own police department is leading this investigation. Zai's mom says the detective told her they should know by week's end if this teacher and possibly some of the older students could face charges. In Forney, Maria.
Now, it's amazing when they sit there and say there's two sides to every story. Okay, that doesn't apply here. Because number one, if that was my child, I'd be in jail. That teacher and everybody else who's trying to defend that teacher, that's a different story, because you're not going to sit there and say there are two sides to every story and at the same time decide that, oh, well, he was allegedly taped to a chair because he couldn't sit still. So as the educator, you forgot how to call a parent? It's elementary school. It's fourth grade. You're gonna have some kids who are going to be disruptive, but yet the teachers who are older and have at least 30 or 40 years have figured it out how to keep children still and calm and learning. But imagine being that parent when you don't find out. You know, the teacher doesn't call you to say your son's disruptive. The teacher doesn't call you and sit there and says, oh, well, your child got hit by the students and he's in the nurse's office. When everyone else has talked to this child, but you as the parent are the last person to know what happened to your child, ooh, I'd be in jail. I'd be in jail. Because you should always protect your child. And school is one of those places where we feel like a child should be protected, should be encouraged to learn, to be creative, to have fun, but most importantly, to get an education. At the same time, it does ask question that yes, it could happen. I mean, I'm not saying it can happen in North and South, but yes, this did happen in Texas. Yes, the principal seems to be defending the teacher. At the same time, I don't blame and this actually kind of goes to the next story. When I sit there and say a lot of parents, especially Black parents, I used to sit there and say homeschool. When I heard the word homeschool, I was like, oh no, because in my opinion, homeschool destroys a child's social skills. I do believe that a child has to be around a group of their peers to develop social cues, to learn social manners and skills and things of that nature to help them be more productive adults. I used to say it at first. It can't happen in the home where your mom is also your teacher. And if you have siblings, they're your classmates. I used to say that. I used to sit there and say, what do you really learn from your parents from homeschool? I used to be that way. Now, again, when you see stories like what we just covered in Texas, that a lot of families, especially Black families, are starting to do homeschooling. Even this study right here, where it sit there and says that according to census data, the number of Black households homeschooling their children has jumped from 3.3 from the start of the pandemic in 2020 to 16.1 by the end of 2020. So you can only imagine that the number of homeschooled children in the U.S. doubled from 2.8 before the pandemic to 5.4 in the 2021 school year. I wonder why. And it could be, and also this could be argued that a lot of it had to deal with a pandemic, because remote learning was difficult for some, because kids need to have that in-person educator. So learning via remotely has been a challenge for some. Won't argue that. And even some parents kind of felt like, I don't trust it because a lot of parents didn't want to get their kids vaccinated because vaccinations were still, it was misinformation trying to battle science data. So that was another thing. So I get that parents wanted to make sure to keep their kids protected. And if homeschooling was the best way to do it, then so be it. But imagine we just got through talking about a fourth grader who was allegedly taped to a chair, got beat on by other kids, and the teacher just took him to the nurse's office. And that's an ordeal. That's traumatic. And that child is going to now have that memory. But like I said before, I get homeschooling now. Am I against it? My stature on it has changed. Because I used to sit there and say, well, I think that kids just need to be out in a live environment. But it was at the time that live environment was safe, was nurturing, actually letting kids be kids to a certain degree as long as they weren't being destructive. But that education ain't the same as it used to be. And it's only because there is an attack on education. And it's being held by conservatives. Conservatives are literally wanting to privatize something. They want to privatize Social Security. They want to privatize Medicare. Now, because they know they can't go after those two things for right now, because Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are voters. And you are basically taking away the voters' money. And they realize that because of how many voters are on those three things. So, what do they turn their attention to? For a lot of conservatives, it's education. We've already seen that over the last year and up until now. But specifically, Governor Dictator Ron DeSantis, and I say Governor Dictator because he basically is acting like a dictator, has decided that there needs to be an installed board at a Florida liberal arts college. Why? Well, he doesn't like the curriculum. Keep in mind, I said he.
Parents, faculty, and alumni of the new college, a small, progressive public college in Sarasota, Florida, speaking out today against Governor Ron DeSantis' conservative takeover of their school. DeSantis has removed 6 of New College's 13 trustees just in January, insisting that the school had declining enrollment and was too focused on things like diversity and critical race theory. The board in turn ousted the college president, appointed a DeSantis ally, and gave him a base salary of $699,000 a year to run this school, which is nearly twice what his predecessor made, and an absolutely enormously large number compared to many college presidents across the country. Here's just some of what the new Board of Trustees heard today in this emotional and contentious meeting.
I'd like to be one of the first students to welcome our new president by letting you know that you are in fact not welcome here.
What you're doing here is not about education. This is political theater. You want political theater? We'll give you a show, and we're not going to make this easy for you.
Does this trustee have the intellectual skills and fiduciary duty to serve New College? Or, as he's admitted to the media, is he merely a soldier of rhetoric in DeSantis' army? Please make sure to comply with outstanding public record requests in order to not break the law. Thank you.
They had to speak quickly, right? There's a clock going. You only had your minute of time. Out front now, the professor that you just heard there, Liz Leininger. She teaches biology at the new college. And Professor, I really appreciate your time. So you got a standing ovation after your statement aimed at the new board, aimed at the president and at Governor DeSantis. Why did you feel so strongly and choose to speak publicly?
Thank you for having me on your show. I chose to speak publicly because I'm concerned about the governor's attempts to curtail educational freedom at New College, the freedom to study what you would like, the freedom to explore different ideas on campus, and also the curtailment of students feeling included and safe and welcome on campus.
DeSantis went on Fox News and he explained why he's trying to defund these programs at New College and at other schools as well. Here's what he said, Professor.
We're getting the ideology out, and we have every right to do it. Some people think that you have a right to operate inside of a university and do whatever you want and have the taxpayers fund any delusion that you may have. So what we're doing is really making sure that these institutions are accountable to the voters that have put us into office.
Professor, what do you say to that?
Our institutions are accountable for educating the students of Florida in all of their brilliance, in all of their diversity, in all of the different ways that they exist here. And I would disagree with DeSantis that banning subjects is okay. If you ban a certain subject, that means that any subject of study is up for debate about whether it can be taught or not. And that's not how universities work. We seek the pursuit of truth and open inquiry, and not the banning of ideas or subjects.
Okay, so of course, I told you, Dictator DeSantis, he is going out. I mean, it's not just him. All conservatives have always said that they want education to change to the way they want things done. Some of them want religious indoctrination. Yes, I said religious indoctrination. They want to put prayer back in schools. Let's put Jesus back in schools. Because, yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem in schools, not the fact that schools, educators haven't been paid properly, not the fact that the education bill in most states keeps getting cut back, as well as the overall U.S. bill for the Department of Education. Let's not forget that schools are overcrowded, that Republicans have introduced schools choice, which basically wants to aim to take public funding away from public schools and give them to private and charter schools. But yes, let's focus on the fact that religion is the problem. Yeah. But again, it's not surprising that even in college, where we pay for it, keep in mind, in college, where you can learn really whatever the frack you want for a degree, but you have a man who's quote unquote a crusader in woke culture, who says that, oh, well, we need to remove those from the board and install those of my own choosing. Oh, you mean the ones who are going to do what you tell them to do? We call them lackeys, but do you? I still say this all the time. How is Dictator DeSantis able to operate with this much power in Florida? How? But then I think about it. Florida might as well be Trump's country. And I say this all the time. DeSantis is basically Trump 2.0. He's just smarter. And I wasn't the first person to say this, and I certainly won't be the last. If you thought Trump was bad, wait till the next one comes. Because the next one won't be stupid. He'll be smarter, and he'll have backing. And we're already seeing that in Florida. And again, you better hope DeSantis doesn't decide to run in 2024, because that is one scary fracking thought. But the last school story we have before we move on, guys, it always amazes me so that whenever you see Christian schools, and again, I do have a bias against religious schools because, I just don't see the point of paying to learn about Jesus when churches are free. But again, that's me. And I also think that's indoctrination as well. But again, that's me. Moving right along, though, you would think that schools who are religious would be open and accepting of others. Well, unfortunately, there is a school in Kansas City, Missouri, that is learning that, sometimes all those who claim themselves are Christians really kind of bullshit. I'm talking about this school here, Urban Christian Academy, which is basically a school in Kansas City, Missouri, that is being forced to close. Why are you asking? Because the school has decided in their confirming mission statement saying that Jesus opens up doors and makes room at the table. But last year they decided to add this quote: "We are an affirming school. We stand with the LGBTQIA+ community and believe in their holiness. We celebrate the diversity of God's creation in all its varied and beautiful forms." So, after that statement got put out, according to the school, donors who actually gave to the school stopped contributing. Many of them citing their interpretation of Christianity as the reason. Now, because of the loss of funding, Urban Christian Academy will now close its doors at the end of the school year due to the loss of financial support. Now, there is no other way I can say this except that's how you know. And I say this all the time. You want to know how atheism just keeps growing? Is if atheism was a church, its members just increase. I mean, think about that for a second. A school has decided to really embrace the idea of God loving everybody. And then you have certain donors out there saying, well, that's not my Jesus. That's not my Republican brown-haired, blue-eyed Hell's Angel Jesus. He does not love the gays. He does not love the condemnations. Leviticus tells you that man shall not lie with man, and woman shall not lie with woman, and man shall not lie with donkey. That's how they sound. That's how they sound. Instead of the simple fact of the matter that school, for it to be a Christian academy, sat there and said, we welcome everybody. We are literally carrying the idea of everybody welcome at the same table. And those who are quote unquote Christians lost their fracking mind and sat there and said, you know what? No, I will not pay for this to happen. You will not sit there and call me if I'm wrong. This is the reason why I sit there and say, it amazes me because Republicans call themselves Christians or Catholics all the time. Christians is the big word, but they call themselves Christians all the time. But again, they're hypocrites. And yes, this might go, but Will, aren't you slightly jaded toward these type of religious institutions and schools? Yes. But when I see a school turn around and sit there and say, we embrace everybody, and specifically say the LGBTIAQ plus community, you're basically saying we want everybody, no judgment. Everybody's welcome. I can get behind that. What I can't get behind is those who see that and immediately say, well, I'm not going to fund this, and then cite their interpretation of Christianity. This is why I sit there and say all the time, I'm not going to say God. Jesus literally had one rule. Love everybody. I didn't see anybody else during the Sermon on the Mount going, well, what about the gay people? I don't see Jesus going, motherfucker, did I stutter? Love everybody. And it's amazing how one school decided to do that, and the real hypocrites decided that they wanted to show their true selves. Just saying. But this is why I sit there and say there, the real war, the real war is not on Christians. The real war is that you have these extreme repressed religious nuts citing their war in education because they know that their demographic is changing. In the next 10 to 20 years, the demographics are shifting, and they don't like their place on the food chain once the dust settles. So how do you fix that? You go after education, because if you go after education, you can control the masses, and that's what they're attempting to do. But speaking of things they're attempting to try to do, a few stories from my progressively backward state of Tennessee. Former officer and aspiring mattress actress, Megan Hall. Look, there's no other way to put it. If you were paying attention to the news or watching my podcast the last couple of weeks ago, we all heard the ballad of Megan Hall and the Laverne Police Department, and that it was one big old eyes wide shut party. So we all knew that Megan Hall and others were fired. Some were investigated, but fired later on. The police chief at the time that knew everything that was going on in his house was also fired. Well, as you can see there, Megan Hall decided to file a lawsuit against her superiors, saying that she was groomed for sex and created a hostile workplace. I've heard some Hail Marys in my time. Some Hail Marys, don't get me wrong. But it's going to be a hard sell for her. And I say a hard sell because, number one, there were rampant allegations. Now we found out that they're true, of officers basically having coys with each other in the police department, in squad cars, behind buildings. Now, I know for everybody that lives in Laverne, Smyrna, and Enoch, Tennessee, we're all going, duh. But for all those that don't live in Tennessee, yes, this happened. But for the natives, yeah, we knew. Couldn't do anything about it because you can't really, police have more protection than really citizens. But the whole idea that she's trying to say is that, well, she's trying to say in the lawsuit that her superiors are basically saying the order for her to get ahead is that she had to give up the goods, and say that, she's more of a victim or things of that nature. And I'm just like, that's going to be a hard sell. it is going to be a hard sell. Just because she was found with multiple men. She was found with multiple men. And the very same men she was found with also got fired. There's still there is nobody standing after all this. When the names got put out, those same individuals, including the chief of police, all got fired. But the fact that she's trying to sit there and say it wasn't me, it was them, feels kind of like a Hail Mary, because I kind of feel bad for your husband, but your husband decided to stick beside you, but so did half the police department. I know it's terrible. I try not to say it. I tried, I feel it miserably. Half the police department already stuck it to her. But anyway, guess we'll follow that story as it goes along. Another story, which again we're also following, is that Ron DeSantis is governor, dictator, possible 2024 candidate. Ron DeSantis has decided that, yep, he was able to take on Disney, and he got his wish.
Earlier today, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill stripping Disney of its longtime self-governing status in that state. For decades, the area surrounding Walt Disney World, known as the Reedy Creek Improvement District, had its own taxing and bonding authority. Now, this had allowed Disney to make its own planning and zoning decisions, as well as have its own fire department. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard joins us now. And Vaughn, I know you've been following this case closely. Help us understand what exactly the signing of this bill does and what the reaction's been so far.
Right. And the special governing district, Aaron, it has been around for more than 50 years. It was created when the developments for Disney World first started back in the late 60s there. And essentially, we're talking about a 25,000 acre area here, multiple miles in which Disney was given the rights to develop, to place its own tax code, as well as issue its own bonds and really plan its own development across this greater Florida area. But after last year, the Disney company spoke out against what was dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, which restricted what public school educators were able to teach about sexual orientation and gender identity. The Disney Corporation released a statement at the time pushing back against the legislation. Now, Ron DeSantis said in essentially retaliation that this was a company that was wrong for speaking out against his policy decision. And today, upon signing this legislation, he said, quote, "The corporate kingdom finally comes to an end. There's a new sheriff in town, and accountability will be the order of the day." And in fact, in his book released just here today, DeSantis said he warned Disney ahead of their decision to go public with its pushback that there would be consequences if it so chose to. The biggest difference now with the special governing district is that that board, which was made up of really Disney allies, it is now going to be made up of 5 individuals that are handpicked by Governor DeSantis. To note, there are other Republicans, including former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, as well as former Vice President Mike Pence, that have pushed back against DeSantis, say that this is against the idea of limited government conservatism. Aaron?
All right.
Ooh, DeSantis. You want to take on the mouse. Only because you tried to do the Don't Say Gay bill and Disney stepped up and said, we do not support this. And then you felt like the mouse betrayed you because in the dictatorship that you feel in your state of Florida, everybody's supposed to bend the knee. Here's what DeSantis is not considering. Disney at any time could turn around and leave. I know Disney, of course, Disney and Reedy Creek, which is the county that Disney was basically self-governing in, that's the one thing that DeSantis is not considering. If Disney were to able to pull up stakes and leave Florida, that's a massive economic hit. Yes, Florida still has Universal Studios. Yes, Florida still has many other theme parks and attractions. But let's be honest, when you think Florida, you think Disney World. And if Disney World were to be pushed to shove, I could see them pulling up stakes and going somewhere else, possibly to another city on the coast, to where any city and state will give Disney all the tax breaks and everything it wants, just to have the mouse sit there and say, welcome home, Mickey, to your new area. And the thing about it is, DeSantis is really betting the house to think that he is bigger than the mouse. Let's just say I wouldn't be surprised if Disney decided to pull up stakes and move everywhere else, because DeSantis will definitely not only be risking his economical state of Florida, he'll be risking his political career on this. Because if you haven't noticed, Disney is more than just a mouse. It is a conglomerate Goliath, concerning the fact that it actually owns nearly 70% of most media streaming services and intellectual properties. And at the same time, well, they're almost owning everything. And you want to take on that multi-headed Hydra? Good luck, DeSantis. Good luck. Moving right along, guys. Of course, that being March 1st, that the pandemic increase for SNAP benefits will end. And that has bothered me. Why? Well, basically because a lot of families do depend on SNAP benefits because it does help to curb some of the costs of getting food. Because as we've seen, the price of food has gone up. But at the same time, the effect that it'll have on families will be massive.
Jessica Ramos is a single mom. Feeding her 6 kids has always been a struggle.
What do you think about when you go to bed at night?
If we're going to be okay for the next week.
Her family is among more than 42 million Americans who receive SNAP benefits, what used to be known as food stamps. During the pandemic, the government boosted those benefits. Jessica received an extra $300 a month.
They came in handy. They really did. The prices are going so high that we need them.
These benefits kept 4.2 million people out of poverty and reduced child poverty by 14%, according to the Urban Institute. But this month marks the end for those expanded benefits because of a provision in last year's omnibus spending bill.
The scary part for the next month, how are we going to live? What's going to happen?
What are the sort of decisions they're going to have to make to keep feeding your kids?
That was so hard. Either pay a bill or go buy some groceries.
That's where you're at.
Yes.
Jessica is not alone. Food banks across the country are preparing for a rise in food insecurity.
We have people calling our organization every day looking for more food resources.
George Matisic is the executive director of Share Food Program, one of the largest food banks in Philadelphia. He says they've already seen a 70% increase in demand over the last year as food prices have skyrocketed.
For organizations like ours, that means having to work round the clock to make sure we're sourcing more food to serve more people.
The typical SNAP household will see monthly allotments drop by at least $95. For older Americans and big families like Jessica's, the difference will be hundreds of dollars.
The people in Washington who are making these decisions, what do you want them to understand about what life is like for you?
For them to put themselves in our shoes, that we really are struggling out here. So please just consider, think about the children, mostly the children.
Dasha Burns, NBC.
And that's the truth. That they, for the longest time, folks are now seeing that those SNAP benefits that were helping during the pandemic to boost, because again, everything has gone up. I mean, we just got through talking about the price of eggs due to avian bird flu. And we've seen the cost of eggs go up. Milk has gone up. Meats, let's just say across the board, everything has gone up. But you know what happened? But again, it's amazing that you don't hear windfalls profits taxes. That in the event of a situation where a company makes a crap load of money, that they're not taxed for it. Oil companies are a great example of that, because even in the pandemic, they are recording record profits. Folks still need gas to get to work, to get around, to be able to handle errands. They still need to have gas in their cars. At the same time, we do need food to live. We do need water to drink. We need a place over our heads to protect us from the elements. All of these things we definitely do need. But food, most importantly, for a lot of these families is key. Because as you heard from the woman in the video, it's the fact of the matter that she has to decide between paying a bill or simply putting food on the table for her kids. That is a situation no parent ever wants to be in, but a lot of parents are experiencing that struggle right now. But again, this is why I say in Congress, I don't expect conservatives to do more, because they'll sit there and say, well, why don't you try? They will say everything else in the sun except giving help. And even the same way, I expect some moderate Democrats to also not agree. They will not extend the benefits, although I think they should. But you know what they should be? But the thing they won't do is they will not suspend the Trump spending bill, the Trump tax breaks. That when Trump was in office, that the tax breaks that he put in place for rich people and corporations are still in effect. Still haven't been taken down yet. Those have been running since Trump's run. And yet that these pandemic benefits are going to end, and yet I'm not expecting Joe to say anything, but I do expect something to be said, because it seems the only time you do, and a lot of people are kind of spurned by elections, because the first thing they'll sit there and say, a politician only listens to you when it's election time, but once they're hired, they disappear. All the more reason why we need to look at who we elect, the terms in place they can look into, the lifetime benefits and pay that they get. All of that needs to be looked at and changed. But we should not depend on Congress or the House or the Senate to do those things. We can actually put those things into ourselves, and as the American people, we can vote on them. Yes, that is something we can do, that we should be doing. But it is sad that a lot of families are now going to have to find a way to make the ends meet in an already budget tight situation. But yeah, aside from that, again, I know I'm conservative heavy just because they're usually the group that makes the most illogical decisions, especially in this case of Jackson, Mississippi, where Governor Tate did sign a bill that prevented transgender care for minors.
Nearly 2 weeks after transgender young people and their families protested the idea of blocking access to gender-affirming care outside the state capitol,
House Bill 1125 is now law.
and that's effective immediately.
No child in Mississippi will have these drugs or surgeries pushed upon them. This stops today. We are taking a stand for all of our children.
Opponents say there aren't any doctors offering gender reassignment surgeries in the state, but the governor wants to ensure that's never the case.
At the end of the day, there are only two positions here. One tells children that they're beautiful just the way that they are, that they can find happiness in their own bodies. The other tells them that they should take drugs and cut themselves up with expensive and experimental procedures in order to find freedom from depression.
Advocates watching the speech from outside the building say the governor shouldn't keep parents and families from making those medical decisions.
And we're here to say once more, this is wrong, it's unjust, and it's going to cost lives.
Jensen Matar says the governor is trying to resolve an imaginary problem that will ultimately impact a small number of Mississippians who are already suffering.
They're already being victimized. They're already being bullied, and so you have a family out here. Trans youth, you have a family. You have people that love you, that are going to continue fighting for you.
Crazy, isn't it? That the simple fact of the matter is just that Republicans have always been in the business of solving an imaginary problem. We want to stop those out there who are trying to push this upon minors. Do you have any record of that ever happening? Well, no, but we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, so let me get this straight. Let's just use an analogy. You're saying there's no such thing as ghost, but you want to install Ghostbusters just to make sure to prevent this from happening. Yes. Ooh, I know. It's stupid. It's stupid. Because number one, by them being a minor, if the parent gives the consent for the child to receive trans care, that's it. Parent is giving their consent, which means that child, however they choose to fly their flag, if the parent signs off on it, why do we care? If the child is getting exactly the type of care and support that they need, why do we care? Why do we actually care that we need to prevent someone from getting the help they need? Because if that's the case, let's stop meth heads. Let's stop giving meth heads methadone. Let's stop doing methadone clinics, because we want to prevent meth heads from happening, but we give them clinics to get clean. Let's stop that. Let's stop Hooters. Let's stop Twin Peaks for, all those women that dress so provocatively. How dare they show their ass and breast in front of me, and all I wanted was wings. Let's stop this imaginary problem of me holding my own self-control. Do you see how dumb that sounds? Because that's what conservatives do. Conservatives don't treat people who are not like them, which is basically old white guys, basically consider themselves hyper religious but really hypocrites. Anything different from them is not a person. It's a problem, a disease, or simply a nuisance. So what do? They can't pray it away, but they can legalize it if there's enough of them. But even more so, conservatives have always treated the LGBTQ plus community like a disease. They've treated it like it was a plague. And even more so, and I say this all the time, and I've got two stories that will support this theory. Here's my theory: that for every time a conservative speaks out against LGBTQ plus issues, they are a closet member of the LGBTQ plus community. Closet member. What I mean by closet is they secretly want to be a part of that club. They're just too ashamed to admit it. Don't believe me? I got like I said before, it's always Republicans that get caught. Especially this guy right here. Nate Chalzine. I don't care if I pronounce his name, but a Texas state Republican who is against the LGBT plus community, has actually a video of him. See, that's him right there, right? Now, sorry for the audio. That is him in a dress. I cannot make that up. That is basically him in a dress. Now, you have to think for a second. There he is. Keep in mind, for all those talks about drag and LGBT and all that stuff, he's in a dress, running barefoot in a very weird vaudevillain type of play. Now, with that being said, though, it is amazing that came to light. And the first thing this man says, and again, when they brought this up and said, well, isn't that you in a dress? The first thing he sat there and says is, and I wish I could make this up, y'all are really going crazy over me wearing a dress as a joke back in school for a theater project. Yeah, that's not a sexually explicit drag show. LOL. Y'all will twist anything. Michelle, please find something better to do than look up old videos from when people were in school. Aha! There's the excuse. It was a theater project. It was a theater project. It happened back when I was in school. But you were in a dress. Almost, I mean, you can almost be considered categorically in drag. A man wearing a dress and you were in drag. But when brought up, you guys turn around and sit there and say, oh, well, why don't you stop looking up old stuff? That happened in school. That happened for a play. I wonder if you felt this way only because now that you're in power. And he's not the only one. Governor Bill Lee, the idiot that runs my state of Tennessee, his picture came out too.
In Tennessee, with a bill there that would make drag shows in public and in front of kids illegal. It is only steps away from becoming law. The state's governor, Bill Lee, says he'll sign it when it gets to his desk. But he's saying that at the same time that a supposed picture of him, seemingly dressed in drag himself, has started going around. This is the photo. Somebody on Reddit posted it from a 1977 high school yearbook, purporting to show the governor apparently in a skirt, a wig, and a necklace. Again, allegedly the governor. It's most likely part of a powder puff football game where kids dress as the opposite gender. The governor's press secretary has not confirmed whether the picture is actually of Lee, but says that any attempt to, in their words, conflate this serious issue with lighthearted school traditions is dishonest and disrespectful. Drag performers and critics of this Tennessee bill are calling out what they see as the sort of irony in this. saying there's a hypocrisy to wanting to criminalize something that the LGBTQ plus community views as an art form, but then being okay with it in the context of like a lighthearted tradition. Rahima Ellis.
Yeah. You can call it exactly what it is. It is hypocriticism at its finest. Because yes, allegedly, they always say allegedly, that is him. Let's just call it what it is. That's him. At the same freaking time, that's two conservatives. Both are against LGBTQ plus of issues and things, issues and people. They are against it, and yet go back in time and see what you find. I say this once, I'll say it again. Whenever there's a Republican that votes against it, wait. It's either a picture, video, secret lover, or all three. Go for the trifecta. But that just goes to show you the hypocriticism of conservatives when it comes to people that are different than them. And that when it comes out. Also check blackface, because blackface is another one too. But that's not as that. Those are a little bit harder to find than a man in a dress, because you can sit there and say all you want to. Call it a theater project. Call it a what they call them, palm puff games, where I guess like Sadie Hawkins dance, where everything's in reverse. You can call it what you will, but the fact is you did it, and either own up and say you did it, or for the simple fact of the matter is leave it be. And at the same time, leave those of the LGBTQ plus community the same as well. Because if you did it, accept it, or at least come out the closet. And, we actually welcome everybody. Well, we try to welcome everybody. I try to welcome everybody. And I'm the LGBTQ plus community tries to welcome everybody. But you got to be honest with yourself first. Talking to you, Republicans. But speaking of coming clean, though, guys, this is why I sit there and say, as we're getting to our feel-good segment, this is why I sit there and say that Fox News is not, number one, not a real news station. Number two, that they push propaganda. And most recently, the Dominion voting systems lawsuit is really bringing a lot of those idiocracies of Fox to light. And if you have somebody that watches Fox News, or you watch Fox News yourself, hopefully this convinces you. I hope.
2020 presidential election, Fox News hosts and their guests called the vote rigged.
We cannot allow America's election to be corrupted.
This is an election nightmare.
News Corp chairman Rupert Murdoch says Fox News was, quote, trying to straddle the line between spewing conspiracy theories on one hand, yet calling out the fact that they are actually false on the other, according to newly released court documents in a $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit against the cable network. Dominion Voting System alleges Fox News knowingly spread false claims about their voting machines to retain viewers. In excerpts of a sworn deposition included in a court filing by Dominion, Murdoch is asked if some hosts endorsed the narrative of a stolen election. Yes, they endorsed, later adding, "I would have liked us to be stronger in denouncing it in hindsight." Fox News says Dominion's lawsuit has always been more about what will generate headlines, taking an extreme, unsupported view of defamation law that would prevent journalists from basic reporting, calling the lawsuit a blatant violation of the First Amendment.
What is the burden of proof in a defamation case?
You have to show not only that the statements were false about someone, but that they were made with actual malice. So that's knowledge that it was false, or a reckless disregard for whether it was false.
Rebecca Tushnet teaches First Amendment law at Harvard.
What stood out to me was the unwillingness to confront the on-screen talent.
According to the court filing the day before the January 6th storming of the Capitol, Murdoch wanted hosts to say the election is over and Joe Biden won. Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott told him, privately, they are all there, but we need to be careful about using the shows and pissing off the viewers. Dominion says that night, the hosts did not declare Joe Biden the winner. Stephanie Gosk.
So again, Fox News, which again is not a news station, reason being, in a previous lawsuit, they labeled themselves as an entertainment company. And now it is coming to light because they talked about Dominion. They talk about Dominion voting systems being fraudulent, calling for Joe Biden, supporting Trump's BS lie that the election was stolen. Now all those chickens are coming home to roost. Now, of course, this could mean anything. Fox is a $1 billion company. They may settle with Dominion, pay a lump sum, and that'd be the end of it. They'll still able to move on as it is. But this is the reason why I keep telling you guys, be finding reputable sources of information, not just going out there and doing your research, which I still highly encourage, but to do so from reputable sources. Fox News is not one of them. Fox News is basically state propaganda if we were in a communist country. You would see 24 hours of Kim Jong-il or Putin at this point. And the fact that, our country is great, everybody else is terrible. We're about almost there. But with Fox News, yes, it's kind of interesting to see what they will do once this Dominion lawsuit wraps up. Like I said, could pay a fine. It certainly won't dismantle the company. But I would think credibility-wise, or lack thereof, would shine light and let people know that, hey, these folks are not who you think they are. Just saying. But one more story, guys, is before we get to our feel-good news segment, which again is actually some good news. You guys remember back in New York during the George Floyd protest back in 2020? Well, apparently there was a lawsuit that got settled. Those that did participate in the demonstrations for the George Floyd protest in New York, especially in the Bronx, those who were quote unquote arrested, detained, or subject to force by police officers are actually going to get a proposed settlement of at least $21,500 or more to each of the hundreds of demonstrators, which again is good news, because if for all those that don't remember that we covered that, we showed the videos of what happened during those protests, that yes, the police were just a little bit hyperactive and detaining individuals, some even violently, some even hurting them. But again, it's one of those things to where, yes, compensation is great. But it's kind of interesting for a protest about a man who was literally killed right in front of our eyes. Also, for some fact of the matter, you have police still exerting excessive force for those that are just exercising their amendment rights. Just saying. But again, like I said, $21,500, especially in this day and age, not a bad piece of change. But protesters will have 6 months to accept that or oppose the settlement. So 6 months from now, we're going to see what happens. But I think I'm not sure. There's still mentions around 320 of those people that might get that settlement, but we'll see how that goes as it goes along. But still, it's nice to see that actually some justice being served, although I'd rather see those police officers that decided to be a little bit excessive not be a part of the police. The bad apples, as they love to point out. But anyway, we're going to move on to our feel-good segment, because usually on How the Frack Got Here, we do cover a lot of things that make it doom and gloom, and hey, sometimes make you lose faith in humanity, but it is midday, which is hump day, trying to get you to Friday, which is Thursday, and I think for it to be, even though Black History Month ended on February 28th, it is Black History all 365, and of course, in this case, Black History was definitely made as Howard University has claimed its first swimming title.
Tonight, America Strong, the new college champions making history.
Overnight, history in the swimming pool. The Howard University men's swimming and diving team winning their first conference championship in more than 3 decades.
It's the first conference title for our men's program in 34 years.
Coach Nicholas Askew leading the Howard University Bison since 2014, the only all-black college swim team in the country.
We are Bison. We are extremely tough. We're extremely resilient.
The young men and women at this historically Black university are breaking records and breaking barriers. Coach Askew, a Howard swim and tennis alum himself, is on a mission to shake up swimming, to make it more inclusive and create an energy that excites the fans and competitors.
Howard is a very special place. We have young men and young women that really, really love being here, because for the first time, they are in a sport, in a collegiate atmosphere that they don't feel by themselves. They have their cup full because now they're swimming and diving with people who look like them.
He's determined to maintain his players' spots on the leaderboards with an emphasis on hard work and character.
There's really no days off. There's a saying we use all the time, don't count the laps, make the laps count.
But with a goal to inspire change, Coach Askew insists his responsibility goes beyond the pool.
My thing to them is, your purpose is bigger than just what we do here as an athlete. Your purpose for being here has so much to do with you becoming the best version of yourself.
Congratulations to the Bison.
Indeed. Congratulations to Howard University Bisons for winning the first swimming title in 30 decades. All great things. And to quote a good friend of mine, Hellspawn Cosplay, for all those, keep talking. We're coming for everything. And I am all for that, because yes, just like you keep on saying about swimming, tennis, as soon as we get some NASCAR drivers in there, we're taking that shit too. And I said it with a smile on my face. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here. I don't have his video up, but again, shout out to my boy, Big VZA Dot. Big VZA Dot, you can find him on Facebook and on YouTube, as he does do his Beats page, where you can purchase beats if you are interested from there, but definitely give him a like and follow. I myself, guys, BlackBox447 can be found on all socials. You can find me, as I usually post reviews of everything that I watch, that I read, that I play. Even gym stuff, because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, the link at the bottom of my link, that's just a wee bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that into your browser, we'll take you to my link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bit, and of course, Off Limits. I kind of forgot about that podcast. That's kind of sad. But definitely like, share, follow. And again, if you like the show, let me know. If you didn't like it, let me know. I'm open to all opinions, everything that we discussed this far. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some of y'all that's going to feel some type of way, especially that I talked about conservatives. But hey, you knew what it was when you typed on the here. But that being said, guys, I do want to let you guys know that, yes, if you notice, we are kind of back to wearing masks in a lot of places. Unfortunately, transmission vectors are back up. So, please protect yourself. If you're going to be traveling or going into areas with a lot of people, please wear a mask, protect yourself, because when you protect yourself, you protect others. That helps our nursing and doctor brethren in hospitals who are still doing the Lord's work, despite not getting paid more and not getting the help that they need. But protect yourself to protect others. If you're the least bit sick, please stay home, because that is how we're going to beat this pandemic, by doing it the right way. Aside from that, guys, the last before we get to our ending part of this, I do want to stand and say this, because again, in 2023 we want to be different, which means that there is no competition. There is none. We are all in different lanes. We are all running different tracks, which means that we're all going to be successful at different times. If someone else has gotten to their goal before you, please don't be salty. Congratulate them. We need more congratulations and less must be nice. We want to see more I'm more proud of you than saying, well, okay. We need to be more as a people, and I'm talking especially to my POCs, to my seasoned Mayo folks. We need to be more appreciative and celebratory, and less isolating and self-hating and being jealous. Because why? We need to be a nation of helping people up, of removing the doors off these areas and creating walkways for everybody to, because there's room at this table. As one of my friends once said, there's plenty of room at this table. You just got to make your own plate. And if you're not able to, stay in the kitchen. Simple and plain. Aside from that, guys, last thing I'll say about how the Frack we got here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel, guys. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind. However, we are providing a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better in society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first Black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black 4-star military general. All great things. When we don't learn from history, that's when we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up by our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? Most importantly, how the Frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we will all get through this. Peace.